The Atlanta Story is a podcast highlighting Atlanta's most interesting creators, entrepreneurs, and builders. I'm Jon Birdsong with Atlanta Ventures, and in today's episode, we have Sara Irvani of Okabashi. This American-made brand produces over 2 million shoes a year right out of Buford, Georgia. Sara took the reins as CEO of the multi-generational family business 3 years ago and hasn't looked back. In today's episode, we talk about the effects of COVID-19 on the company, what makes a product and company American-made, and future plans of Okabashi's growth. After today, you'll know more about how a family business has grown into a sizable player in the footwear space, why it's important for factories to be located in the US, and how Okabashi is just getting started. We hope you enjoy the show and subscribe to the Atlanta Story. Welcome to another Atlanta Story podcast. On today's episode, we have Sara Irvani. Sara, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And right now you are at the Okabashi factory in Buford, Georgia. Is that correct?
Yes, only about 45 minutes outside of the city.
Great. Well, thank you for your time today. We've got a lot to talk about. Before we get into post-COVID, what that means for Okabashi and how y'all are navigating, help us understand just what is Okabashi and give us a little bit more than what's on the website.
Sure, of course. Well, Okabashi was founded in 1984 by my grandfather, and my father ran it until about 3 years ago when I took over the business. We're now one of the remaining 1% of US footwear manufacturers. When we started, about 60% of shoes were being made in the US. So we've seen this incredible journey of outsourcing and just sort of decided to keep our factory here and keep production here. So,
well, that's going to be a big topic. Yeah, that's going to be a big topic. And I want to get to American made, especially in today's environment where you see a lot of politicians saying that, we need to bring manufacturing back to the United States. The shoes that y'all make right now, it's the ultimate food comfort. That's the ultimate foot comfort. Excuse me. How did y'all decide on sandals and comfort as the value prop?
So at the time when the company was founded, you really didn't have comfortable ergonomic design at an accessible price point throughout the US. So the idea was to use injection molding technology, where you can use a single mold that would always create an arch support, a heel cup, and sort of engineer in the comfort, and then be able to create it on a mass scale. At the moment, we're producing just under 2 million pairs a year. And so using traditional methodologies, this would not be possible.
Right. 2 million pairs a year. Talk to us about the factory now, the team. How are you navigating through the COVID crisis from a moral support and?
Yeah. Well, I think we've all been winded by it, but now on week 7, I don't know if new norm is the term that one should use, but we're definitely getting used to it. We have 3 brands, the Okabashi brand, which plays more within the general merchandise, food and drug sector. We have the Okabashi brand, which is the leading spa sandal in a lot of independent boutiques. We've got Third Oak, and then we've got contract manufacturing. And it's been interesting to see how this crisis has really hit each of the different channels differently. So talk to us about the different markets of those brands within the Okabashi family. So the market of, let's say, Okabashi, which is at Target, at CVS, at Walgreens, among many other retailers, we've been seeing an impact in terms of the people coming to the stores, but the partners that we are with are really stronger than ever. So we're very grateful for that. Whereas a lot of the independent boutiques that the Okabashi brand partners with have really been hit. And so you've just seen that market totally collapse in a way that is heartbreaking, because you know that every one of these individual boutiques is someone's life journey and a passion, and it's people that are involved. And then we also have our e-commerce business that we do ourselves, and that's been interesting to see sort of really a 5x increase there. And so you just see this really rapid shift of the market. And to your earlier question about how are we sort of coping with it, first priority is safety. And what does that mean? So we really spent a lot of time saying, okay, what is our PPE policy? What are all the sort of other policy elements that one has to walk through? New regulation coming out sort of the first 3 weeks, every single day there was a different policy that you needed to adapt to.
And how many employees in the factory?
Right now we're about 50.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So we've scaled down from 3 shifts to 1 shift to be able to do all of the cleaning and everything required to keep our distribution center and our factory as safe as possible.
And y'all are not the only shoe company in America trying to figure things out right now. Being American made, how do you have advantages over, let's say, a competitor that is not American made?
I think the advantages can be divided into 2 categories. You've got the supply chain benefits, where we're able to make per order for our retail partners. So they don't need to make the inventory commitment a year in advance like they would traditionally. So that really helps our retail partners. But then on our consumer side, we're really seeing a renewed appreciation for what Made in USA means in terms of job creation. Mm-hmm. And that has just really been overwhelming in the most wonderful way in the last few weeks, that our customers are really coming back and saying, keep on going, keep on making jobs. And it's exciting to be able to do that in a time like this.
So in the Okabashi strategy war room, when you see e-commerce 5x and then you see the boutiques nearly 0, how do you shift to doubling down on e-commerce? What are some of the things that y'all have done?
Well, we've done a lot of cross-training. So most of our team is cross-trained between distribution and manufacturing. And that allows us to be lean and sort of shift operations, but not necessarily shift team members, which I think is so important. And it's really, we've brought in different team members, let's say from sales into social media, and just rejigged ourselves. And having that flexibility, I think, is so important in a time like this. You've just got to stay limber as an organization so you don't break anything as you jump from one thing to the other.
Yep. I want to continue talking about Okabashi, but let's dive a little bit deeper into your story, some of your education. Obviously, there's a family legacy of making shoes, but you were born in Atlanta, raised somewhat in Atlanta, and then boarding school, or give us a little bit more about your education and some of the steps that led you to become the CEO today.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Atlanta and sort of came to the factory as a young girl, following my father. And, sort of as a 7-year-old, you think that you're being super, super helpful, but probably just making a mess, sort of half shredding papers. And then I went to school in England for a number of years, and then came back to the US for university, where I studied philosophy. Focusing on how we understand metaphor. So perhaps a touch esoteric, but always knowing that I want to go into business. So working sort of whenever I wasn't in school. And from there, I did strategy consulting and realized that a basis of finance is so important in business to be able to unpack stories. And also, today in my job, you have to be multidisciplinary, and you have to be able to dive deep in every department. So I went and did a Master's of Finance in Cambridge, did some work in venture capital, first from an operations perspective, then from an investment perspective. And then Ever the Geek did an MBA. And about 3 years ago, my father was looking to retire from shoemaking. And I just felt that there was never a better time to have sustainable, made in USA footwear production reach its potential. So for 3 years now, I've been coming to the factory, and it's been quite a ride.
With many CEOs that continue the legacy of the family, there's always the question of how do you know one is ready, and when did you gain the confidence to say I can take this and bring it to another level?
Probably about a year and a half after I started the role of CEO. I think that there is so much unknown. It's very much a first day of school feeling. And I think that doesn't matter how much experience you have. You've got to understand and create a dynamic with the team. You've got to foster trust. You've got to know the customers. And all of this takes time and sort of jumping in with a bit of naivety. I don't know if I would recommend that for everyone, but it means that you'll definitely get a chance to swim. Whether you sink or float, we'll see, but go for it.
Yeah, exactly. And so what are some of the grand visions, or with the legacy business, there's certain processes and certain mind frames that are going to be there as a new CEO comes in. How do you create an environment where it's new and it's fresh with the new CEO, but also stay on track to what's gotten you to where y'all are today? Knowing that that's a pretty tough question, but any ideas from a tactical perspective of things that take that where you can take small little risks to have incremental gains?
I think that the key to that, and perhaps it sounds cliche, is really keeping your customer in mind. That you can grow your market, you can change sort of the core of who you target into a wider dimension, but you really should never alienate your core customer, and you should understand why they're coming to you in the first place. I'm very lucky that I work closely with my head of sales, who led customer service for nearly 10 years. And so in all of our discussions, we really keep our customer in mind. And then that allows for the flexibility to say, okay, from a operations process standpoint, from a management standpoint, we can veer more into perhaps a millennial tech startup route, and still maintain that impact of sort of our core brand love. I think that from an operations perspective also, just thinking outside of the box and challenging the team. But if you keep the customer in mind, I don't think you can go that far astray.
Yep. Well, let's go back to Okabashi today and in the now. Right. I mean, you've got 50 employees in the factory right now. You've changed it. You've changed from the shifts from 3 to 1. How does this look, 2 months from now, 6 months from now, from a revenue perspective? I mean, every CEO right now is trying to understand, well, if I was going to grow at 20%, it's now going to be at 8%, or it's now going to be like, how do you view right now, based off of the last 7 weeks and kind of predicting the future for your business? How do you view the next, let's just say 2 to 6 months?
Well, I think what you say very much resonates. We've definitely taken a haircut in terms of our growth expectations. However, with the changing mindset of the customer, I think that will, in the long term, continue to see strong growth driven by the made in USA element rather than the sustainability element that we had previously seen being our
Hmm.
key growth driver. So I think, and then also with the e-commerce driving more than wholesale. So I think the nature of that growth has changed. I think next 2 to 6 months, every CEO, not just in this country, in the world, just needs to keep an eye on cash and make sure everything is okay. But we're really looking to stay within a conservative growth mode.
Yeah.
So it's nice, but all of the policy and just sort of keeping track of that and making sure that we're crossing T's and dotting I's, that's taking a lot of bandwidth.
Can you share, so 5x on the e-commerce side, is that straight from your website? I was looking at Amazon beforehand and seeing all of the wonderful reviews that y'all shoes are getting. But if you've got, Target e-commerce, direct to consumer from Okabashi, and then you've got Amazon, how do you look at that as a retailer?
Well, as a retailer, I think what's important to make sure is that product offering is perfect for the specific guest that comes through, and so we work really closely with our retailers to make sure that it is the brand story is presented in the right way, and that how do we activate with the relevant influencers in that market, and
Yes.
do a lot of really unpaid marketing, and that works well. Ours is an authentic story. And so it doesn't necessarily need the paid marketing strategies that other brands may need. Um, and so then, in terms of where the actual online growth comes from, it's funny, it's really coming from our website. And interestingly, perhaps a bit to share how the sausage is made, um, driven a lot by paid advertising, which we're now finding profitable at a level that it had never been before.
Hmm. That is very interesting. Um, and made in America has meant a lot of things to a lot of people. To Okabashi and to your family, y- y'all have truly built something that, from designing to off the shelf, has been all in America. What is that possible today to build something that, from the ground up? If someone were to go start a shoe company, and I mean, or do you have to have generations of brand equity and brand loyalty to do this? I mean, I may need to reframe the question of, right now, politicians are saying we need to move everything back to the United States. And well, some people are saying, well, just the economics aren't there. Okabashi has proven that the economics are there. What is the secret to defining those economics for you guys?
So I think, when you had that outsourcing movement,
Yes.
um, we lost a lot of know-how in this country. A lot of factories were closed, and with them, those jobs that were held by people who knew so much about manufacturing. And it will take a long time before this country regains all of the know-how that it had before. It's simply going to sort of skip a generation. And I think in that sense, we really need to rebuild it. We're lucky, specifically, I think, in Georgia, that we have such a good technical college system. There is a culture of manufacturing in Georgia, so we're very lucky there. So I think if one is going to do it, there is no better place than Georgia to do manufacturing. And I sort of came to that conclusion a couple of months after starting my role, but I'm just constantly blown away by the talent. Um, so if you have the know-how, I think it is possible to start new made in USA operations. I think that it is important not to get distracted by a lot of the shiny things that one can sort of say, oh, well, I need this type of new machine and so on and so forth, in a way that your capex could mean that you'll be a decade away from profitability and break even. But if you have more of a MacGyver approach and you have the right know-how, and then you engineer and you design for the environment, not only from a labor perspective, but also from a safety perspective, then it's really more than possible. What's interesting to us is we see a lot of processes that are being done abroad that would really be illegal to do here. For instance, a lot of what they do abroad in terms of gluing and the solvent use and how that impacts the team. And sort of when you think about Made in USA, for me personally, it's about providing, jobs where there is respect, where there is growth opportunity, and transparency.
And we're going to take a quick break here and share that this podcast is brought to you by Atlanta Ventures. If you are looking to start the next $300 million business out of Atlanta, check out the studio at atlantaventures.com. Do you remember during the outsourcing movement, the family decision of saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to stay here. And why didn't you guys outsource?
So I feel like it was a dinner table conversation on repeat growing up. And also when I started, the question that I got asked the most was, what's your name? And is production going to move abroad? Not really from our team, because they knew our family, but really from outsiders. And how can this be done? And why would you do this? And I think that for my father, it was so important to keep his commitment to the team, to keep his commitment also to the customer, and to be able to see how are people being treated according to his name, what materials are being used. I mean, right now we use a material that is 45% soy by weight. It's 100% recyclable. We're a near zero waste facility. And you can't run a factory this way if it's thousands of miles away and you only show up once a year and get a dog and pony show. So it's just as much transparency for us as it is for our customers.
Great. Wave a magic wand and the two biggest challenges right now with Okabashi, in the next 6 to 12 months, and give us a perfect world scenario of what 6 to 12 months looks like, knowing that those two challenges have now been overcome.
I think it will be about getting back onto our path. What I really is a bit of a killer is not knowing how this whole COVID situation will evolve. And so no matter how it does, just being able to proactively plan accordingly. And then I really see us growing it. I think that Sustainably Made in USA has its best chapter ahead of it. And I think that within the footwear space, that hopefully we'll continue to be a leader.
Yep. And obviously it's on your website and it's all over your branding, but how do you tell that Made in America story even more, right? Besides getting on the Atlanta Story podcast.
Well, it's so funny how many ways you can say Made in USA. So
right.
For Okabi, we say it more in terms of, handcrafted in Georgia. For Okabashi, it's more Made in USA, sort of just very clearly. For our Third Oak brand, which goes for more of the sort of millennial conscious consumer, it's about locally made. And so I think that it's about understanding the psychology of your target audience and just translating it into that. And, that's what we've been seeing, to go back to the e-commerce side, is with all of these different dashboards, one often sort of forgets that what you're doing is you're sending real messages to real people. And so you've just got to imagine the audience and then say, what would I tell that type of person in the supermarket to communicate the story the best way? So that's how we sort of figure out which language to use.
And the Third Oak brand, that's relatively new, correct?
Yes. That was launched about, nearly my goodness, time is flying, nearly 2 years ago. And it's sort of a sleek and sustainable look, quite minimalist.
And so that was a good example of taking a risk on a new market. If you've got your market here, and the Third Oak now kind of opens it up. What are some of the stories of this was success, or now we have to kind of massage the product market fit a little bit? Any lessons learned of almost launching a brand new brand to a growing market?
Yeah, no, it definitely, there were a lot of questions within the branding as well. That was the part that really surprised me, what went into a brand identity, and then making sure that it fit in a non-competitive way, non-cannibalizing our existing market as well, given the brand equity we have in the portfolio. I think it's about also finding the core retailers that can help communicate it to the audience. And it's amazing how much that market that you go after is determined by the partner, and really by the first couple of partners that you have. If you have a brand and the first few partners you have aren't quite targeting perfectly or resonating with your core demographic, your whole brand evolution will be changed.
Right. The story's tough to change after that.
Yes, no, exactly.
That's fascinating. And so now you're in Atlanta. You've been in Atlanta for 3-4 years, or 3 years as the CEO. And you did some of your management consulting in New York. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, we've had a lot of conversations with folks who have moved to Atlanta or back to Atlanta. And, what were some of the things that surprised you when you came back, knowing that, hey, you grew up here, but you went to boarding school, you kind of left for, 15 years, came back. And what are some of the surprises post coming back?
Well,
from living perspective.
From a living perspective, I'm so grateful that we live in a city where you can walk and be outside, and that there's nature and a warm springtime. And I think that the sort of sense of Southern hospitality and friendliness is one that shouldn't be underestimated. I mean, I lived in New York for many years, and embarrassed to say I never got to know my neighbors. Whereas now I have gotten to, and I think that really improves quality of life. And I don't think that you can beat Atlanta's quality of life in any city in the US, or I'd actually venture out of any of the places that I've lived at the very least. And then from a business perspective, I think Atlanta has a mature infrastructure and has everything that one would want, but it's not at a saturation point where you can't find new growth and you can't turn over stones and find opportunity. And so I think that it's that perfect point of a established yet dynamic city. And
absolutely, the back to the talent perspective that you were talking about. So where are the schools that people are graduating from where you're hiring them, right? Is it all over the map in Georgia, or, whether it's factory workers, or give us an idea of how the hiring process and what you look for when you hire, but more importantly, are they in colleges from Georgia?
Mostly, yes. And I really think that we've had mixed success with getting people to relocate to have a job. So we really are conscious of people's commute and their own quality of life when they take the job. We tend to recruit from Georgia Tech, SCAD, a lot of local technical colleges.
Because Buford's 45 minutes from Atlanta, right?
Yes, and if you, I mean, for the way that I drive, maybe it's a bit unusual, but it's an easy drive up, and it's against traffic. And also there are a lot of people who live within Buford and Swanee and Gwinnett who are thankful not to have a commute. And so it really works out well in terms of our location. But one thing that I've really learned through this experience is education is good, but attitude is so much more important. And one thing that I'm really proud of our team is that we provide a lot of growth opportunity. So it doesn't matter if you come in as an operator in manufacturing, there is nothing to stop you from taking a senior management role.
And let's dive back in on the attitude question, because it's really tough to find that in a short interview, right? And
yes.
and how do you do it?
Frogs before.
So how do you do it? And how does your team vet for the attitude? And what is the attitude you're looking for?
The attitude that I'm looking for is entrepreneurial, proactive, and someone who simply refuses to acknowledge roadblocks. They'll just bulldoze it down. And that's sort of how we operate here. And the other thing that is hyper important is positivity. And I think that everyone who joins should make this a more positive workplace and not bring it down. And it's amazing how just one person not fitting into the culture can really change the entire team dynamic. In terms of how I interview, it's definitely evolving. And so our team has a range of experiences and personalities and perspectives. So we really try and have everyone on the management team sign off for a new hire. So, and we all have different types of questions. Mine have evolved, hopefully, for the better. But at the end of the day, you could ask rather inane questions, and it's a gut feel. So long as they can sort of prove that they can do the actual work, it does come down a bit to gut.
Yep. I have a couple other friends who are making the transition in a generational business, and this might be a little personal, but how do you as a leader take the reins without hurting the feelings of the existing generation, but still making them feel included to the future of the vision, and making sure that it's yours to run, but you're knowing that you're managing a lot of personalities, in the office, and also all the generational decisions that are made before you.
Yeah. I think that if you don't work extremely hard, it's a non-starter. I mean, really, for the first 2 years, I don't think anyone can say that they've put nearly as many hours in as I have. And while that's not a total results hedge, it does mean that, if you talk to other stakeholders within the company, no one can say that you aren't putting your effort in. The other thing, of course, is you want positive results, and what you define as positive results might be counterintuitive. You might look at number of jobs that I can create. You might look at how much of a preferred employer are we. It's not just the financial results, but you can sort of say, okay, well, this is how much I've worked. This is the results. And I think that has been very helpful. And then I think it's about just, agreeing upfront about places where you do need help and you do need insight, and not having a black box. And we've really opened up how we operate more to our internal team. And I think everyone likes to know all of the different aspects of the business, even if they aren't directly involved.
Great answer. Okay, a couple more to wrap up. I know we're in the middle of a work day, and we all need to be back grinding. You touched on why Atlanta. You touched a little bit on that. Can you just give us one or two more insights into, for you personally, what Atlanta, or why Atlanta? And of course, we always like to say, what has Atlanta done for you? You talked about knowing your neighbors and walking around the streets, which is great. Favorite restaurant, or things to do before the coronavirus?
Yeah, I was about to say it's totally changed now. I think that I'm still discovering the city, and I liked there's an Italian restaurant near West Side. I think it's Forza, that has pizza.
Yeah.
And back when we could, it had a really great vibe and lots of people and busy and crowded and all those things that we dream about today. I just think Atlanta it's a city of so much hope and regrowth. And even when we look at the actual history of the city, with it sort of rising from the ashes, that there is still that spirit within the city, and it's contagious. And who doesn't want to live in a place where there's just so much optimism?
Yep, absolutely. And growing up in Atlanta, Atlanta, help us understand what it's done for you.
I think that it just was a wonderful place to grow up, and it had always a strong sense of community, and I think it's that community, and that also that small town village feel of Atlanta, which is so nurturing as a child, that I'm really grateful for, and just being able to run around and build zip lines with my brothers, and go a little bit crazy and be a tomboy. I think that was so good. Living in New York, there's just physically less room to run amok.
And then last question, 10, 15 years, is the Okabashi vision to create another, 50, 200, 500 jobs? I mean, where do you want to take it?
Oh, much more. No, I really see us continuing to add new capabilities, and partner with sort of contract manufacturing. And there's so much opportunity here. And I think that with good luck and hard work, that we can really create something, and that we're sort of, the macro and the micro trends are moving in the favor of local production. And I think our sustainability practices will also help, and through that create more and more jobs. And that's really what I love the most.
Wonderful. Sara Irvani, thank you so much for being part of the Atlanta Story podcast.
Thank you so much.
This podcast is brought to you by Atlanta Ventures. It was co-produced by JC Lucas and Jon Birdsong. If you are looking to start the next $300 million business in Atlanta, check out the studio at atlantaventures.com and the companies we work with who've done it before. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it at your next coffee meeting or dinner greeting, rate it, and write a benevolent, eloquent review.